Have you ever noticed that almost every river has places where this type of gravel accumulates? What you may not know is that these spots could be hiding high-value gemstones like rubies and sapphires buried among the gravel. In fact, some of these gems have been sold for astronomical prices, like the legendary Star of Fura ruby, which was auctioned for more than $34.8 million at a luxury jewelry auction in New York. Now, the real question is, have you ever ignored one of these rare gems simply because you didn't know how to identify precious stones in your area? I hope that's not the case for you, but while many people overlook these opportunities, there are those making small fortunes simply because they know where to look and how to sell their discoveries at the right price. And after watching this video, you could be one of them. Many subscribers of this channel have shared stories about throwing away stones that could have been highly valuable, thinking they were just ordinary rocks. Just like Ezekiel, a subscriber who used to collect colorful pebbles deep in the Arkansas wilderness. Since he lived in an unexplored region, he would often walk through nature on weekends, picking up small, shiny stones he found among the river gravels. Until one day he realized they were actually small diamonds. Even though they weren't of exceptional quality, these diamonds had a considerable market value. That's when Ezekiel realized he needed to learn how to locate and identify high-value precious stones that were still hidden in his region. So after mastering this technique, he built up an impressive collection of diamonds and other gemstones of all shapes and sizes. However, in his eagerness to sell his findings, he was tricked by an opportunistic jeweler who bought these stones from him at a much lower price than they were actually worth. After this experience, Ezekiel decided to learn how to evaluate his gemstones so he could sell them for their true market value, turning this knowledge into a small fortune of approximately $80,000, almost enough to buy one whole Bitcoin at today's price. But how did Ezekiel manage to reach this point? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to teach you in today's video. First, you'll learn how to collect these gems in nature, and then we'll understand how to sell them for the best possible price. Now, you might be wondering, how does someone throw diamonds away? Well, this could happen to anyone, including you. That's because not all precious gems are obvious in nature. Most of them have inclusions, may be covered in dirt, or even embedded in another mineral, just like the diamond you're seeing on your screen right now. To simplify things, let's use rubies and sapphires as an example. These are rare and extremely valuable stones that can be found in many rivers around the world, including rivers in your own region. But the same tips can be used to find sapphires, diamonds, agates, and almost any type of precious mineral that you might be lucky enough to come across. The first step to finding precious stones in your region is knowing exactly where to look and what to analyze. Every gemstone has specific signs that indicate its presence in certain areas, and when it comes to rubies and sapphires, it's no different. This is especially true because both of these gems are actually the same mineral, corundum, formed from a combination of oxygen and aluminum, with small impurities that determine their color. For example, ruby gets its red color from chromium, while sapphires can be blue, yellow, green, or even colorless, depending on the elements present in their crystalline structure. But the big question is, how do you know where these stones are hidden? The answer lies in indicator minerals, natural clues that help identify the most promising areas. And when you learn to recognize these minerals, everything becomes much easier. One of the first signs to look for is the presence of white quartz. This mineral is found in many geological formations associated with rubies and sapphires. Additionally, quartz-rich regions often contain other valuable minerals, such as tourmaline and beryl. So if you find a lot of white quartz in the soil, it's worth exploring the area further. Another important indicator is the presence of metamorphic rocks, such as schist. These rocks tend to be fragile and often have a metallic shine. Mica schist in particular contains large amounts of mica, another mineral that comes in various colors and reflects light in a similar way. If you see a lot of shiny particles in the soil, this could indicate the presence of gemstones nearby. Additionally, pegmatite is a rock that deserves special attention. It resembles granite but contains large, visible crystals. In some areas, there are entire rock walls made of pegmatite, and many of the largest ruby and sapphire deposits ever found were associated with this rock. Another factor to consider is the presence of a luminous gneiss, which looks similar to granite but has elongated streaks and a high aluminum content, one of the main components of corundum. This type of rock can be a strong indicator of ruby and sapphire deposits, especially when found together with quartz and feldspar. However, if your region also has basalt, marble, and granite deposits, your chances increase even more. That's because marble, for example, is a rock where rubies are commonly found, and it was precisely in these formations that some of the world's most valuable gems were discovered. If you find marble with small reddish inclusions, it could be a strong indicator that rubies are present. And the more of these signs you find in the same location, the higher the probability that rubies and sapphires are nearby. But it's not enough to just know where these stones might be. You also need to understand how to search for them the right way so you don't end up letting a fortune slip through your fingers. Now that you know how to identify whether a river near you might contain sapphires or rubies, it's time to learn how to collect these gems in practice. If you find a ruby or sapphire, even if it's not of the highest quality, that's already a great sign. It means that the area has potential, and even better specimens could be nearby. You just need to keep exploring. Precious stones found in rivers go through a natural selection process over thousands of years. During this process, the most resistant gems remain intact, while lower quality stones break apart and eventually disappear completely. This happens because, as they're transported by the river's current, these stones collide repeatedly with other rocks and grains of sand, a process that wears down their surfaces and can break weaker minerals. Rubies and sapphires, being extremely hard, can withstand this constant erosion, which means that any specimen found in a riverbed has already survived this long natural process. The appearance of these stones in their raw state can be deceiving. Many rubies and sapphires found in rivers don't have the vivid brilliance and perfect transparency that we see in jewelry. Instead, they might appear as dull, lifeless stones, often covered in a layer of impurities, clay, or embedded in other minerals. Raw sapphires can have grayish-blue, greenish, or even brownish tones, and some may contain internal inclusions that affect their transparency. But even if the initial color doesn't seem impressive, the value of these stones can be high, especially if they have a good size and a structure suitable for cutting. The same applies to rubies. Many reddish stones found in rivers have a pinkish red hue and might seem unremarkable at first. But when examined up close, they reveal their unique characteristics. Even a rough-looking ruby can be transformed into a high-value gemstone once it is properly cut and polished. One of the most important characteristics of these gems is their density. Rubies and sapphires are significantly heavier than many of the common stones found in rivers. To give you an idea, a ruby can weigh nearly twice as much as a piece of quartz of the same size. This high density causes these gems to accumulate in specific areas of rivers, usually in natural cavities, crevices between rocks, and spots where the current slows down. The heavier the stone, the more likely it is to have settled in these locations instead of being carried further downstream. Additionally, dense minerals such as chromite and ilmenite, which are rich in iron and titanium, tend to accumulate in the same places as rubies and sapphires. If you find a concentration of these dark, metallic-looking stones, there's a high chance that gemstones are nearby as well. This happens because these minerals behave similarly in water, settling in areas where the current loses strength, such as river bends, small depressions in the riverbed, and gravel pockets. Another mineral to watch for is garnet, which is often found alongside ruby and sapphire deposits and can serve as a natural indicator of their presence. Like corundum, garnet is a dense gemstone, and in many cases, it also has a reddish coloration. However, it's important to know how to differentiate them, as garnet's red tone is usually more brownish, while rubies tend to have a brighter pinkish red hue. At first glance, the difference may seem subtle, but under good lighting, or when compared side by side, it becomes much more noticeable. A simple and highly effective test to identify rubies is using an ultraviolet flashlight. Under this light, rubies usually glow with an intense pink hue, an effect that does not occur in most other stones. This glow is due to the presence of chromium in the ruby's composition and can be a practical way to recognize rubies in the field. However, this test has its limitations, as it only works for rubies. Sapphires, on the other hand, generally do not show this effect under ultraviolet light, so other methods must be used to identify them correctly. Another detail that can help identify these gems is something known as the stone's DNA. This popular term refers to a unique characteristic of rubies and sapphires, an internal woven texture similar to a tic-tac-toe pattern with lines crossing in different directions. This structure can be observed in many specimens, especially once they are cut, but it won't always be visible to the naked eye. Some stones may show this pattern in a subtle way, requiring the use of a magnifying glass for a more detailed analysis. This effect can be noticed in some specimens of golden sapphire, which exhibit striations that resemble woven fabric patterns. Additionally, in some cases, the phenomenon of asterism can be observed, where light reflects off the gem's surface, forming a six-pointed star. However, it's important to remember that not all sapphires exhibit this effect, and its absence does not mean the stone isn't authentic. Another key characteristic to differentiate rubies and sapphires from other stones is the type of fracture they display when broken. Corundum is an extremely durable material and does not break in a uniform way. Unlike minerals such as quartz, jasper, or agate, which tend to break with smooth, glass-like fractures, rubies and sapphires break with completely irregular dull fractures. This lack of cleavage is a defining trait of corundum and can be an excellent indicator that you are holding one of these gems. Moreover, if you find low-quality specimens, it's only a matter of time before you find high-quality ones. That's because nature naturally selects the most durable gemstones, and if a ruby or sapphire has survived the forces of the river, it means there are more specimens nearby. Now, going back to our friend Ezekiel, how did he manage to sell the gems he found? Well, let's suppose you found 4 sapphires and 2 rubies. How should you evaluate them for sale, and where can you sell them? The first step was understanding exactly what he had in his hands. Ezekiel knew that just claiming they were sapphires and rubies wasn't enough. He needed solid proof to ensure he got the best market value. To do this, he started by analyzing his stones using basic hardness and density tests, eliminating any doubts about their authenticity. But he wanted absolute certainty and to know exactly the quality of the gems he had found. That's when he turned to the book Gemology Journey for Beginners, which helped him identify the essential characteristics to determine the value of his stones. Using the book's information, he learned that color, clarity, size, and the presence of inclusions were key factors in determining the value of a sapphire or ruby. He discovered that sapphires with a deep blue color and minimal inclusions tend to be more valuable, while rubies need a vibrant red hue to fetch higher prices. He also realized that even if some of his stones weren't completely transparent, they could still be valuable if they were large or had unique features, such as the asterism effect. But Ezekiel didn't stop there. To ensure he received a fair price, he decided to consult a certified gemologist. The expert examined his gems, confirmed their authenticity, and provided a detailed report, an essential document for selling to serious buyers willing to pay a fair price. With this certification in hand, he began studying the market. Ezekiel knew that selling quickly and cheaply to a middleman wasn't a good idea, as it would mean losing a significant portion of his profit. Instead, he searched for direct buyers and analyzed the best ways to sell his gems. He visited local jewelry stores to understand how they purchase raw stones, and then hired a gem cutter to cut and polish his gems. If the stone required more specialized buyers, such as collectors, Ezekiel turned to online platforms where he could list his discoveries, either raw or cut. After launching his online sales, he discovered that there was a huge market for raw gemstones, and that, with good photos and detailed descriptions, he could attract buyers from all over the world. Ezekiel's strategy was diverse. He still sells part of his gems directly to local jewelers, ensuring quick cash. As for the rarest and highest quality stones, he listed them on online platforms like eBay and Etsy, where he found buyers willing to pay more for high-quality raw materials. With every sale, Ezekiel learned more about the market and the art of negotiation. It wasn't enough to simply own valuable stones. He needed to know how to sell them the right way. He realized that different buyers paid different prices depending on how they intended to use the gemstones. For example, a lapidary might pay more for a large raw stone with no internal fractures, while a collector would look for rare and exotic colors without necessarily worrying about the overall gem quality. And speaking of that, here's another valuable tip. Consider attending gemstone fairs, where collectors and lapidaries are actively searching for unique gems for their work. However, if you still have doubts after watching this video, the best option is to take your stone to a trusted gemologist or jeweler. They have specialized equipment, such as high magnification loupes and spectroscopes, that help accurately identify the composition and value of the gem. But be careful. Dishonest professionals might try to deceive you by offering a price far below the gem's true value. This happens all the time, and many people end up selling rare gemstones for pennies, not realizing they had a real treasure in their hands. And we don't want you to be the next victim. So to avoid this situation, you need to know exactly what you have before selling. This means learning simple but highly effective tests such as the density test and hardness test, ensuring that no one tricks you into selling a diamond for the price of a topaz, which is significantly cheaper. The good news is that you don't need to spend thousands of dollars on equipment to do this. In our digital book, Gemology Journey for Beginners, you'll learn step-by-step how to identify precious stones without needing expensive tools. The ebook includes an exclusive collector's table listing all the precious stones cataloged worldwide, plus a complete guide to recognizing real diamonds with simple at-home tests that anyone can do. Normally, this knowledge costs $20, but for a limited time, subscribers who click the first link in the description will get a special 50% discount, allowing them to get all this material for just $10. So click the first link in the description and learn how to identify your precious stones with confidence. A single gemstone may not be enough to change your life, but remember, statistically, finding a precious stone in nature is easier than winning the lottery. And depending on the country you live in, you may be able to search for diamonds without needing a license. But if this isn't the right time for you, that's okay. You can still subscribe to the channel for free and follow our weekly videos filled with practical tips to identify and find all types of gemstones. Starting with the next video, where you'll learn hands-on how to find other gems, including diamonds, topaz, and tourmalines. Thanks for liking and subscribing. Good luck, gem hunter.